In a future not far off, a devastating virus wipes out 99% of humanity, leaving only 513 survivors scattered across the globe, with the rest of the world rendered uninhabitable. They are compelled to eke out an existence on a small island nestled in the Baltic Sea. Amidst this bleak backdrop, a woman brings new life into the world, greeted with congratulations from those around her, while her father quietly prepares to bid her farewell. Accompanied by loved ones, the aging patriarch makes his way to a towering cliff overlooking the sea. As a television journalist captures the poignant scene, they reflect on the cyclical nature of life, where even amidst hardship, hope springs anew. According to the island's laws, the grandfather resolves to sacrifice himself so that his granddaughter may thrive. With solemn farewells exchanged, he takes the fateful leap into the abyss, just as his daughter welcomes a second child into the world, unwittingly presenting a challenge for the island's fragile community. In the enclave of Hilo Land, precisely 513 souls inhabit its confines, where birth rates are meticulously regulated. Unexpected arrivals, such as newborns, necessitate a somber ritual, the voluntary or coerced sacrifice of another. Orchestrating this macabre dance of life and death is Beatrix, the community's leader, who presides over a strict social hierarchy. Deeds, whether virtuous or flawed, dictate one's standing, with each individual assigned a numerical rank. Here, the veneer of democracy is upheld through communal decision-making via voting. Today's proceedings, however, spotlight those languishing at the lowest rungs of the ladder. Among them stands number 511, a companion of Beatrice's son, offering a glimmer of solace amidst despair. Yet, the grim reality looms. Refusal to leap willingly will result in a more brutal fate, cast into the unforgiving depths of the sea. 512 represents an elderly woman, frail and deemed obsolete by the community, while 513 embodies Etienne, a man tainted by past transgressions. Life on Helgoland carries on as usual, with Dr. Merrick and his son Linus venturing to the laboratory in pursuit of a vaccine for the ravaging virus. Linus yearns for the mainland, where vital resources await, yet his father staunchly opposes the perilous journey. Resources trickle in from coastal settlers, rendering mainland expeditions perilous and unnecessary. Dr. Merrick's aide, Judith, guides their rounds, commencing with number 513. Etienne's misdeeds pilfering painkillers from the pharmacy plummet his standing, resulting in food deprivation and imminent peril. Meanwhile, islanders adhere to strict food quotas at the shop, navigating the harsh realities of survival in this unforgiving enclave. In an unforeseen mishap, a child topples a jar of pickles, prompting Henrik to advise his friend to share his food with the boy. This act swiftly elevates his social standing, earning admiration from his peers for his kindness. Meanwhile, Henrik suggests to Eaton's wife, Lisa, an arrangement where she exchanges intimate services for food for her husband. Beatrice intervenes, urging her son to exhibit restraint, but his sense of invincibility prevails. Returning to the laboratory, Merrick unveils its dark purpose, housing mainlanders subjected to drug trials in search of a virus cure, all of whom have succumbed thus far. Elsewhere, Lisa's encounter with Henrik is interrupted by an alarm signaling the approach of illegal immigrants. Despite orders to retreat, Henrik opens fire, claiming lives needlessly. Subsequently, a community vote determines Etienne as the designated sacrifice, until Lisa exposes Henrik's transgressions, sparking further revelations from other victims. Unable to shield her son from scandal, Beatrix decrees his exile from the island to appease the outraged populace. The next day, Linus defies his father's wishes, announcing his intent to journey to the mainland alone, signaling a fracture in their bond. As the doctor appeals to Beatrix for help, she adamantly refuses, prioritizing her own dying son over his. The boys embark on the boat, Henrik notably lacking a protective suit. En route, militant Heinz issues a stark reminder of the mainland's perilous nature, emphasizing the risk of being consumed if left behind. A water supply malfunction triggers an alarm, prompting Beatrix to investigate the frequent disappearances of their engineer, ordering surveillance. Discovery of a forbidden radio transmitter by a staff member raises concerns. Meanwhile, the island's boat reaches Herg. Despite Henrik's reluctance to disembark, Heinz forcibly ejects him onto the dock. Simultaneously, the engineer pleads with Beatus to permit his wife onto the island, with Beatrix promising to consider the request. The commander entrusts Linus with a specific task, while he himself guides the rest to a rendezvous with the Count, who holds sway over this part of the urban landscape. The exchange commences, with islanders providing greenhouse-grown produce, in exchange for medical supplies scavenged by the Count's people from abandoned hospitals. Meanwhile, Linus defies orders, venturing ashore, where he encounters an individual offering medicines from a ship's laboratory. Unaware of his squad's return to the boat, Linus engages with the stranger. Upon reaching the dock, Linus receives a box of flu vaccine, but the demand for passage to the island in return sparks tension. Linus negotiates, explaining his lack of authority, but their exchange is interrupted by an attack from slum dwellers. Although Heinz's mask is torn off during the scuffle, his comrades repel the assailants. With the boat departing without Linus, he races to catch up, managing to board but sustaining a torn protective suit. The individual who supplied him with medicines is fatally wounded while chasing after him. Upon arriving back on the island, both of the wounded individuals are swiftly isolated for quarantine. Nevertheless, Linus skillfully manages to conceal the vial acquired from the mainland. The Count's entourage discovers the deceased boy, revealing a vial of vaccine in his possession. Meanwhile, Linus confides in his father about the ordeal and surrenders the vaccine. His father, fraught with concern for potential infection, begins examining him. Heinz is also quarantined, showing signs of illness. A rash manifests as the initial symptom of a viral disease. News of Heinz's infection sparks unrest among the islanders. Later, Merrick scrutinizes the vaccine brought by Linus, verifying its authenticity. Eager to explore further supplies on the ship, Merrick seeks Linus's release from quarantine, an impossibility at present. Despite disclosing everything to Beatrix, she adamantly insists on maintaining secrecy to prevent a revolt. Merrick exhausts his resources trying to aid Heinz, to no avail. Meanwhile, Henrik roams the city and encounters an elderly woman bartering beautiful trinkets for sustenance. Despite initial rejection, Henrik's display of vitality captivates her, and she invites him to join her on the island. Beatrix extends an unexpected offer to Lisa to become her assistant, signaling forgiveness for her role in Henrik's exile. This gesture elevates Beatrix's reputation as a champion of justice. For the first time, Merrick permits Judith into the quarantine area, where she is horrified to discover two subjects from the mainland. Obliged to start her duties, Judith collects blood samples from a young girl under Merrick's direction, appalled by his clinical approach. On the mainland, Henrik accompanies the old woman to her home in an old theater, where she outfits him in a new suit and sanitizes him with alcohol. She warns him against repeating his friend's mistakes. Meanwhile, on the island, despite Mar's efforts, Heinz succumbs to death, and Luce discovers a troubling rash on himself. In Hamburg, Henrik desperately pleads with the elderly woman to accompany him to the Count, but she adamantly refuses, much to his escalating frustration. Enraged, he follows her, discovers her hidden treasures, and fatally assaults her. Back on the island, Beatrix announces Heinz's demise and blames the commander for their voyage to the mainland. Incensed, the young person joins her protest, pretending to be ill, inciting panic among the adults, who scatter before casting their votes. Nevertheless, the commander's authority dwindles, prompting Beatrix to introduce a system of parental accountability for their children's conduct. Meanwhile, a woman learns her daughter is pregnant, refusing to terminate the unplanned pregnancy, despite her mother's pleas. At the same time, the engineer tells his wife about the open spot on the island because of Heinz's death, assuring her he'll help her come over. However, a couple eavesdropping on them opts not to report him, understanding his desire to reunite with his wife. In the laboratory, the test subject girl's condition worsens. Judith sympathizes with her, learning she was sold to the island by her family, though she harbors no resentment. Linus reveals a rash to his father, confirming his infection, though he requests to be used for experiments, a decision his father struggles with. In Hamburg, youths who discovered medicines for Linus are presented to the Count, who seeks the ship. However, their guide has perished, complicating matters. The Count proposes they join him in locating the vessel, promising their safety. Merrick starts examining his son, who begs him to promise to find the ship with the laboratory. Afterward, the doctor searches for the ex-commander and requests assistance in returning to the mainland. She agrees, on the condition that he frees her from the unjust captivity she's endured. On the mainland, Henrik walks into an ambush orchestrated by a gang of cannibals. He discloses his identity and begs to be escorted to the Count. The cannibals agree and bring him to the Count's residence, where he negotiates a deal. Henrik will be exchanged for antibiotics, with the Count hoping to collect a ransom from Beatrix, In the meantime, the engineer reaches out to his wife, informing her about an upcoming interview and advising her to prepare diligently. The Count confronts Henrik about his exile. In response, Henrik offers to expose the weaknesses in the island's defenses in exchange for capturing it. The engineer's spouse arrives at the designated site and successfully qualifies in the initial round for the pharmacist role. Merrick observes a decline in Linus's health. The following day, the top two performers in the testing must demonstrate to the islanders who is most deserving of the doctor's position. One candidate is the engineer's wife, an experienced pharmacist, while the other, Daniela, claims to be a surgeon. Meanwhile, on the island, Eaton finds a bottle of schnapps and offers it to the windmill mechanic. Simultaneously, the island's leadership committee conducts the final evaluation. Daniela answers all questions correctly, but the pharmacist also exhibits sound knowledge. Beatrix proposes a vote, and with Merrick's deciding vote, the committee selects Daniela, triggering a nervous breakdown in the engineer. He attacks Merrick, but Beatrix intervenes, clarifying that no promises were made to him. The events unfold swiftly as Daniela makes her arrival on the island, greeted by a welcoming party at the dock. However, the joyous occasion takes a dark turn when it's discovered that illegal intruders from a cannibal gang have clandestinely arrived on the island aboard the boat. Meanwhile, the engineer attempts to contact his wife, but she advises him to let go of the past and move forward. Daniela is shown her new residence amidst the island's community. Under the cloak of night, temptation proves too strong for the windmill mechanic, who indulges in the discovered schnapps. Unaware, he witnesses the engineer scaling the windmill and tampering with one of its blades. The following morning, the drunken mechanic, viewing footage of the incident, climbs up the windmill himself, leading to a fall that leaves him dangling precariously with a broken leg caught on the ladder. Emergency services transport the injured man to Merrick, who opts for amputation and seeks assistance from Daniela. However, her response is peculiar, indicating a lack of familiarity with the situation. During the surgery, Merrick probes the new surgeon, prompting a startling revelation. Daniela admits she was a Pilates trainer, having memorized surgical techniques merely to secure passage to the island as per the Count's orders. She anticipates imminent changes on the island and positions herself to guard him. Unbeknownst to them, Judith overhears their conversation, revealing her knowledge of Merrick's past transgressions committed for his son's sake. Intent on exposing him, she plans to report everything to Beatrix. However, Daniela retaliates, attacking and ultimately killing Judith. Together, they dispose of her body in the sea. Later that evening, Liza implores Beatrix to reconsider the newly imposed law holding parents accountable for their children's actions, sensing the growing discontent among the populace. As tensions escalate on the island, Beatrix asserts her authority, reminding her assistant that decisions rest solely with her. Concerns arise about Judith's absence, prompting inquiries to both Merrick and other islanders, but her whereabouts remain unknown. In the evening, the island police apprehend the engineer, coinciding with Linus's deteriorating health. Merrick fights to save his son's life, resorting to intubation, but the boy's frailty weighs heavily on his father. However, another crisis emerges when a mother mourns the loss of her child, implicating her own mother and the island's healer, Laura. Meanwhile, Beatrix interrogates the mechanic, attempting to extract information about Judith's presence during his surgery, to no avail. Accusing him of intoxication, she threatens his expulsion from the island. Her investigation leads to the discovery of a dislodged tooth, further fueling suspicion. Confronting Merrick, Beatrix accuses him of Judith's murder. Though he confesses, expressing a desire to eliminate her, Beatrix shifts blame to the engineer, citing his unreliability and prior turbine sabotage. Despite Merrick's objections, Beatrix leverages his son's condition to secure compliance. On the mainland, the Count announces their departure to new lands, including Henrik among their ranks. Back on the island, the engineer faces trial. Beatrix orchestrates a guilty verdict, citing turbine sabotage and Judith's murder, supported by forensic evidence. Despite the engineer's appeals to his community, a final vote seals his fate. The man is escorted to the seashore, where the entire island's population gathers. They bind him, leaving him at the water's edge as the tide begins to rise. As his desperate cries fade into the sound of the waves, the crowd disperses, leaving only Merrick behind, haunted by his own inaction. Later, he sits beside his son, seized by the need to confess the truth of how it all began. The memory of that pivotal day remains vivid. Their family's intended journey to Heligoland was disrupted when Merrick's wife and Linus's mother, Tessa, was detained in her laboratory. As an esteemed epidemiologist, she was tirelessly working on developing an antiviral for a devastating new disease sweeping the globe. Despite the delay, Tessa reassured her husband, promising to join them the following day, as her institute provided ample security. Arriving on the island, Merrick and Linus encountered a scene of desperation at the local store, where a throng clamored for dwindling supplies. The owner, refusing entry due to the depleted stock and impending mainland delivery, faced the ire of the frustrated crowd. Amidst the chaos, Merrick found an unexpected ally in Beatrix, who, disguised as a senior salesperson, assisted him in procuring essentials for his son. Her deft management of the situation quelled the unrest, offering assurances of forthcoming discounts. The following day, as the islanders departed, pledging to return on the morrow, tensions simmered, exacerbated by the store owner's resentment towards Beatrix's unilateral decisions concerning his establishment. The man lashes out at her, oblivious to the quiet support from the store staff for the woman's actions. Later, Beatrix gathers her colleagues, stressing the need for self-reliance and proactive measures in the face of uncertainty, emphasizing that they must fend for themselves without expecting help from higher-ups. Meanwhile, the community leader tasks Merrick with overseeing health checks for everyone on the island, aiming to sever communication with the mainland to prevent infection spread. He requests Merrick to fill in for the fleeing doctor. Merrick reaches out to his wife, Tessa, but she's unable to come due to pending analysis. The next day, Merrick visits Laura, then working as a doctor's assistant, who guides him through the new clinic. On another day, Beatrix fortifies the store, much to the chagrin of the arriving director. She explains the need for protection, asserting they won't wait to be attacked over canned goods. Tensions rise when customers arrive, denied entry, but offered a list to place orders. One man attempts to force his way in, met with firm resistance from Beatrice, who warns of armed salespeople. The crowd, glimpsing figures with weapons, relents and complies with the new protocol. The troublemaker departs, but in the evening, Beatrix spots lurking figures outside, choosing to keep silent despite the director's dismay at her actions. Nevertheless, the woman deftly influences him, demonstrating compassion for his children who are presumably on the mainland, prompting his departure. Yet, he swiftly falls into the clutches of armed individuals guided by the troublemaker from before, pressing for entrance and endangering the director's safety. Beatrix addresses the salespeople, presenting the dilemma. Admitting them risks losing everything, but saves the director, while refusal puts the director in danger. The sales staff decide against opening the doors, and when Beatrix communicates this choice, the troublemaker fires, fatally hitting the director. Seizing the moment's shock, Beatrix commands them to disarm. They comply and flee. Beatrix arms the salespeople and instructs them to apprehend the troublemaker, witnessed by her underage son. The following day, Beatrix approaches the island's main police officer, urging him to coordinate self-defense. He declines, so Beatrix reveals the bound troublemaker in her trunk. This chaos awaits the island if they don't seize control. Later, Merrick visits Beatrice, finding her prepared with medicines due to repeated pharmacy robberies, and she assures him of protection. Concerned, the doctor consults the community leader about Beatrix's militant approach, prompting him to convene a meeting. Beatrix derides his pacifist stance, instructing the apprehension of the director's killer. She adeptly sways opinion, inciting the crowd to violently assault the killer. The authorities align with Beatrix. She proposes a vote for his demise, and all present concur without dissent. The man is dragged to the shoreline, where he succumbs to the waves as Beatrix delivers a speech about the necessity of forging a new world to endure. Morality will come later. Merrick reaches out to his wife, urging her to come as a furious mob storms her institute. He recounts the events on the island as the crowd, convinced of the doctor's guilt, wreaks havoc and breaches her office. Merrick helplessly witnesses the crowd brutally ending his wife's life. Later that same evening, Beatrix approaches Laura with an offer to purge the island of troublemakers for better governance. Upon noticing a calendar displaying the number 53, Beatrix deems it as the optimal population for the island. When Laura expresses shock, Beatrix provides her with insulin, pledging regular supply to ensure her survival. The following day, the shoreline reveals numerous bodies, likely tossed overboard from a passing ship. Laura and Beatrix extract their infected blood, administering it to the undesirables under the guise of vaccines. Some succumb immediately, fueling rumors of a spreading infection across the island. The island's women implore Merrick for assistance in testing the islanders, despite his profound grief over his wife's demise. Reluctantly, he agrees to join them. Subsequently, Laura and Beatrix publicly disclose the names of those deemed infected. Merrick observes that these individuals resisted the new leadership, prompting Beatrix to assert that only 513 can inhabit the island, urging him to fulfill his duty and discover a vaccine. Under cover of night, the purportedly infected are rounded up onto a ferry and dispatched into the unknown. As the vessel departs, Beatrix underscores to Merrick and Laura that the day's events are pivotal for their salvation. Vowing to find a cure for everyone, Merrick holds Beatrix accountable for her actions. Concluding his tale, he seeks forgiveness from his son, who, in his dying moments, implores his father to depart. Merrick shares a recorded confession with Laura, Daniela, and the cleaning lady, intending to reveal the truth to the islanders. However, Daniela, brandishing a weapon, seizes the cassette and destroys it, warning Merrick of the impending arrival of the Count and the inevitable upheaval. Revealing her pregnancy, Daniela expresses reluctance to raise a child in a place plagued by cannibalism. In the meantime, on the mainland, the Count and Henrik witness the arrival of a ship laden with a cutting-edge laboratory and plentiful medical supplies, offering Merrick a renewed sense of hope and abundant resources. Simultaneously, Beatrix indulges in a leisurely swim in the pool, oblivious to the approaching ship bound for the island, while a local priest falls victim to the cannibals who have clandestinely arrived. The narrative lacks standout innovations. A world grappling with a virus bears striking resemblance to our own. However, the rapidity with which a shift transpires in human psyche, leading to the abandonment or deliberate disregard of conventional moral norms, is noteworthy. The instinctual herd mentality swiftly assumes a utilitarian guise, compelling individuals to prioritize mere survival, a notion fraught with ethical ambiguity.